How does a woman watch 40 years of marriage dissolve in 3 days because her husband preferred his young assistant? How do you fight back when your own family turns the grandkids into bargaining chips? And how do you reclaim your legacy when everyone expects you to just disappear quietly? I'm going to tell you exactly what I did when I discovered my husband's affair and how I used one phone call to change everything. It started on a Tuesday morning in the parking lot of the county courthouse. I was sitting in my car with the engine off, holding a manila envelope I wasn't supposed to have. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely grip the steering wheel. Inside that envelope were copies of emails between my husband Robert and his executive assistant Monica. Not love letters, business plans. Plans to restructure his company, plans to liquidate assets, plans to force me out of the home we'd lived in for 38 years. The emails dated back 6 months. 6 months of meetings I wasn't invited to, lawyer consultations I didn't know about, financial maneuvers designed to leave me with nothing while he started fresh with a woman half his age. I had 2 grandsons who called me Nana and drew pictures of flowers that I kept on my refrigerator. I had a daughter named Claire who was supposed to be on my side. I had a retirement account I'd helped build through decades of managing the household while Robert climbed the corporate ladder at his engineering firm. And somehow, in the span of 72 hours, all of it was about to vanish because I'd been too trusting to see what was happening right in front of me. If this story has already touched your heart, subscribe now, leave a like, and tell me in the comments what city you're watching from. I met Robert when I was 24 years old. He was an ambitious young engineer with a new position at a mid-sized firm in our town. I was working as a secretary at the same company. We got married 8 months later in a simple ceremony at the Methodist Church on Maple Street. Our daughter Claire was born 2 years after that. I quit my job to raise her, while Robert threw himself into building his career. That was the deal we made. I would create the home. He would create the income. For 40 years, that's exactly what we did. The house we bought in 1987 was a modest 2-story colonial with a detached garage and a yard big enough for Claire to play in. Robert always said it was temporary, just a starter home until we could afford something bigger. But life happened. Claire grew up. The mortgage got paid down. Robert became a senior partner at the firm. The temporary house became the place where we celebrated every Christmas, every birthday, every family milestone. The kitchen still had the original cabinets I'd repainted 3 times. The living room still had the fireplace where we'd hung stockings for Claire, and then for the grandsons. The master bedroom still had the window that faced east, so I could wake up to morning light. My reading glasses were always going missing. I'd find them in the oddest places. On top of the refrigerator, in the bathroom medicine cabinet. Once I found them in the garage on top of a paint can. It was a small thing, but it reminded me that I was getting older. My knees hurt when I wore heels too long. My hands weren't as steady as they used to be. I'd spilled coffee on my favorite blouse just that morning and had to change before leaving the house. These were the details of being 62 years old. Small inconveniences. Nothing that prepared me for what was coming. The youngest grandson was 6. His name was Tyler. He had Robert's blue eyes and my mother's smile. He was the one who made me drawings. Crayon pictures of our house with a big sun in the corner and stick figures holding hands. Me and him. Nana and Tyler. The older grandson was 9. His name was Mason. He was starting to notice things. Starting to ask questions adults didn't want to answer. Why does Grandpa work so late? Why doesn't he come to Sunday dinner anymore? Why does Nana look sad all the time? I didn't have good answers for Mason. I'd been telling myself Robert was just busy. The firm was expanding. He had new contracts, new responsibilities. Monica was his assistant. Of course they worked late together. Of course she called him on weekends. That was normal. That was professional. That was what I told myself every time I felt that twist in my stomach when I heard her name. But we had 30 days before Robert's lawyer filed papers to begin liquidating what he called marital assets. 30 days before the house went on the market. 30 days before everything I'd built disappeared. I didn't know that yet when I was sitting in the courthouse parking lot on that Tuesday morning. I thought I was there for something else entirely. I thought I was there to sign paperwork for a simple estate update. Robert had said it was routine, boring legal stuff. He'd handed me the appointment card and told me to handle it while he was in meetings. Trust me to take care of it, he'd said, just like always. But when I walked into that lawyer's office, it wasn't Robert's regular attorney. It was someone I'd never met, a younger man with expensive shoes and a tone that made my skin crawl. He slid the papers across his desk and started talking about asset protection and restructuring and fair division. I remember the smell of his cologne, too strong, chemical. I remember the hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. I remember my vision going blurry as I tried to read the dense paragraphs of legal language that basically said I was signing away my rights to contest anything Robert wanted to do with our money, our home, our future. I didn't sign. I said I needed to review it with my own lawyer. The man's face changed. He wasn't polite anymore. He told me I was making this difficult. He told me Robert had been very clear about his expectations. He told me the smart thing to do was cooperate. That's when I knew. That's when the 40 years of trust shattered in one fluorescent-lit office with bad cologne and expensive shoes. I walked out with the unsigned papers and drove straight to the firm where Robert worked, but I didn't go inside. I sat in the parking lot and called Claire, my daughter, the one person I thought would stand beside me no matter what. She answered on the third ring. I could hear the boys in the background, cartoons playing on the TV, Tyler asking for a snack. Normal sounds, safe sounds. "Mom, what's wrong?" Claire asked. I could hear it in her voice. She already knew something was happening. How much did she know? How long had she known? I asked her if Robert had said anything about selling the house. There was a pause. Too long. Then she said we needed to talk in person, not over the phone. Could I come to her place? Could we sit down like adults and figure this out calmly? That should have been my first warning. The word calmly. The phrase like adults. These were the words people used when they were about to tell you something you didn't want to hear, and they needed you to control your reaction. But I went. I drove to Claire's house in the suburbs, a nice neighborhood, good schools. Her husband David worked in finance. They had a comfortable life. I'd helped them with the down payment on that house, a gift from Robert and me when Mason was born. Family helping family. Claire opened the door before I could knock. She looked nervous. Her hair was pulled back tight. No makeup. A coffee stain on her shirt. She ushered me inside quickly, like she didn't want the neighbors to see. The boys were in the playroom. I could hear them arguing over a toy truck. Tyler's voice rising. Mason telling him to share. Normal sibling sounds that made my chest ache because I didn't know how many more times I'd get to hear them. We sat at her kitchen table, the same table where we'd had Sunday dinners for years, where I'd taught the boys to make cookies, where we'd celebrated Tyler's 6th birthday 3 months ago, with a dinosaur cake and too much sugar. Claire poured me coffee I didn't want and sat across from me with her hands folded like she was at a job interview. She said Dad had talked to her about the future, about making changes, about the fact that I wasn't getting any younger, and maybe it was time to simplify. The house was too big for just me, too much maintenance, too many stairs. Wouldn't I be happier in a smaller place? Something modern, something with less upkeep. They'd found a nice assisted living community, with activities and a nurse on staff. I could visit the boys on weekends. It would be better for everyone. I sat there with my coffee going cold and looked at my daughter, the little girl I'd raised, the woman I'd supported through college and helped with childcare and always tried to protect. And she was telling me with a straight face that putting me in assisted living at 62 was for my own good. I asked her about Robert and Monica. Her face flushed. She looked down at her hands. She said, Dad deserved to be happy. He'd worked so hard for so long. If he'd found someone who appreciated him, who understood him, then maybe I should try to be mature about this. Mature. That's the word she used. As if the mature response to betrayal was polite surrender. I asked her what she'd told the boys. Why hadn't they been over to visit in 3 weeks? Why had she canceled Sunday dinner twice in a row? Claire's jaw tightened. She said the boys needed stability right now. They were picking up on tension. It wasn't good for them to be around conflict. David thought it would be better to wait until everything settled down before bringing them around me again. David, her husband, a man who worked at the same firm as Robert, a man who probably knew about Monica before I did, a man who was now controlling my access to my own grandsons because it was better for stability. I felt something crack open inside my chest. Not heartbreak, something sharper, colder. The realization that this wasn't just Robert's plan. This was a coordinated effort. My family had met without me and decided my future. They'd drawn up papers and made arrangements and chosen sides, and I was on the wrong side of every single line. I stood up. Claire started talking faster. saying we could work this out, saying I just needed to listen to reason, saying the lawyer was expensive and Dad didn't want to waste money on a fight. If I cooperated, if I signed the papers, then everyone could move forward peacefully. The boys could still see me. We could still be a family. Just a different kind of family. A more honest family. Honest. I almost laughed. Instead, I picked up my purse and walked toward the door. Tyler came running out of the playroom. "Nana!" He crashed into my legs with his sticky hands and his gap-toothed smile. "Can you stay for lunch? Can we make cookies?" Mason followed more slowly. He was watching my face. Smart kid. Too smart. He knew something was wrong. I hugged them both, kissed the tops of their heads. Told them Nana loved them more than anything in the world. Claire was standing in the kitchen doorway with her arms crossed. I could see the guilt in her eyes. She didn't want to be doing this, but she was doing it anyway. Because David said so. Because Dad said so. Because everyone else had decided what was best, and Claire was going along with it to keep her own life peaceful. I drove home in a daze. The house was empty. Robert was still at work, or with Monica. I didn't know anymore. Didn't know when he was telling the truth and when he was lying. Didn't know how long this had been going on. 6 months of emails, but maybe longer, maybe years. How many late nights? How many business trips? How many times had I packed his suitcase and kissed him goodbye while he was planning his exit? The mail was piled on the kitchen counter. Bills, advertisements, a thick envelope from the mortgage company. I opened it with shaking hands. A refinance offer. Or that's what it looked like at first. But the details were wrong. The numbers didn't match our current mortgage. This was for a much larger amount. A cash-out refinance that would pull equity from the house and leave us with a new 30-year loan. At our age, when Robert was 65 and supposedly planning retirement. I called the mortgage company. Waited on hold for 12 minutes listening to elevator music. Finally got a representative who confirmed that yes, an application had been submitted. No, it hadn't been approved yet. They were waiting for final signatures. Both borrowers needed to sign. The closing was scheduled for Friday. 3 days away. Did I have any questions? I had 1,000 questions, but the only one that mattered was who initiated this application. The representative couldn't tell me. Privacy reasons. But she could tell me that the application listed Robert as the primary contact. All correspondence had gone to his work email, not our home address. Nothing had been sent to me. I thanked her and hung up. Friday. The closing was Friday. In 3 days, Robert expected me to sign papers that would drain our home equity, burden us with massive new debt, and probably funnel that money straight into accounts I couldn't access. And if I refused, the lawyer with the bad cologne had made it clear. Robert was prepared to fight. He had David on his side. He had Claire cooperating. He had Monica waiting in the wings. He had a strategy. What did I have? An old house with outdated cabinets. A daughter who'd chosen her father's approval over my well-being. 2 grandsons I might lose access to. 40 years of partnership that apparently meant nothing. A retirement account that was probably already half emptied. And a growing sense that I'd been invisible for so long, people forgot I could still fight back. I sat at the kitchen table where I'd eaten breakfast alone for months, while Robert left earlier and earlier for work. The table where I'd paid bills and planned meals and kept the household running while he built his career. My hands were still shaking, but my mind was clearing. There was something I'd forgotten, something important. Robert's company wasn't just his. It had started as a partnership. 3 engineers who pooled their money and expertise back in the 90s. Over the years, 2 of the partners had retired and sold their shares. But the original operating agreement was still in effect. I'd seen it once, years ago, when we were updating our will. A thick document full of clauses about profit sharing and decision-making, and what happened if a partner wanted to exit or divorce or died. I'd signed it, not as a partner, but as a spouse, acknowledging that I understood the terms, agreeing that any marital assets tied to the company would be subject to the operating agreement's provisions. At the time, it seemed like boring legal protection, something that would never matter. But now I was remembering specific language, something about requiring board approval for any major financial restructuring if it involved partner assets, something about protecting company stability during personal transitions. I went upstairs to Robert's home office. He kept it locked now. That was new. 6 months ago, I could walk in any time. Now the door had a keypad lock. I tried our anniversary, Tyler's birthday, Mason's birthday. Nothing worked. But I knew Robert. He was brilliant with numbers and terrible with memory. He wrote down his passwords, always had. There was a leather notebook he carried in his briefcase. His briefcase was in the bedroom closet. I found the notebook tucked in the side pocket, flipped through pages of engineering calculations and meeting notes. And there it was, a list of codes, the office door, his laptop, his work email, his bank app, everything I needed. The office door clicked open. I felt like a criminal. 40 years of marriage, and I was sneaking through my husband's things like a stranger. But what choice did he leave me? I booted up his computer, used the password from the notebook, his desktop filled with folders and files and a background photo that made me stop breathing. Robert and Monica, at some restaurant, her hand on his arm, both of them smiling, happy. When was this taken? How long had he been using this photo? I clicked through his email. Months of correspondence with lawyers, financial advisors, real estate agents, plans to sell the house as soon as I signed the refinance papers, plans to use that cash for a down payment on a condo downtown, closer to the firm, modern building, security, gym, perfect for a new chapter with Monica. The realtor had already done a market analysis. Our house could sell for $600,000. After the refinance payout and agent fees, Robert would walk away with around $300,000 in liquid cash. His half of the retirement accounts would be another $400,000. Add in his company shares, and he'd be worth well over $1 million. And me? The emails laid it out clearly. I'd get the minimum required by state law. The house sale would technically split 50-50, but after the refinance debt was paid, my half would be maybe $70,000, enough for a deposit on a small apartment. My retirement account would be split, but Robert's lawyer argued that since he'd earned the income, he should keep a larger percentage. I'd end up with maybe $150,000 total at 62 years old, after 40 years of building a life together. The emails with Monica were worse. Not love letters. Business strategy. She was positioning herself as his new partner, not just romantically, professionally. There were draft documents showing her buying into the company, becoming a junior partner. Using money from where? The emails didn't say, but I could guess. The refinance, the asset liquidation. He was using my home equity to fund her career advancement. I printed everything, every email, every document, every scheming conversation. The printer in Robert's office whirred and clicked, spitting out page after page of betrayal in black and white. I didn't know what I was going to do with it all, but I knew I needed proof, physical proof, something they couldn't delete or deny. My phone buzzed, a text from Claire. Mom, I know you're upset, but please think about the boys. They need stability. This doesn't have to be ugly. Just sign the papers and we can all move forward. David says, you can see them every other Sunday once things settle down. Please don't make this harder than it has to be. Every other Sunday. 2 visits per month with my grandsons. That was the offer. Conditional on my cooperation. Conditional on my silence. I stared at that text until the screen went dark. When had my daughter become someone who would use her children as leverage? When had I raised a woman who thought that was acceptable? I heard the garage door opening. Robert was home. Earlier than usual. I shut down the computer, grabbed the stack of printouts, and shoved them into my purse, locked the office door behind me, went downstairs trying to look normal, trying to breathe normally. My heart was hammering against my ribs. Robert came through the kitchen door with his briefcase and his jacket slung over one arm. He looked tired, older. When did he get so old? When did the lines around his eyes deepen? When did his hair go from salt and pepper to mostly gray? He smiled at me, the same smile he'd given me for 40 years. How much of it had ever been real? Hey, Hon, he said, did you get to the lawyer's office this morning? Get that paperwork handled? I lied. I said yes, said everything was fine, said I'd signed what needed signing. His whole body relaxed, relief flooding his face. He actually hugged me, kissed my forehead, told me I was making the right choice, told me this was going to be better for both of us. We'd both be happier. Wasn't that what mattered? I stood in his arms and felt nothing. No love, no anger, just cold clarity. This man was a stranger. Maybe he always had been. Maybe I'd been so busy building a life, I never noticed I was building it alone. He suggested dinner out, celebrate getting the paperwork done. There was a new Italian place downtown he wanted to try. We could make it a date night. Like old times. I said I wasn't feeling well. Headache. I'd just make soup and go to bed early. He looked disappointed but didn't push. Said he'd grab something on the way back from the gym. The gym. Right. I wondered if Monica would be there too. After he left, I sat on the couch in the living room where we'd watch the boys play on Christmas morning, where Tyler had opened his dinosaur toys and Mason had assembled a complicated Lego set, where we'd been a family. I pulled out my phone and did something I should have done days ago. I called the one person who'd always told me the truth, even when I didn't want to hear it, my older sister Linda. Linda lived 2 states away, but we talked every week. She'd never liked Robert. Thought he was too focused on status, too concerned with appearances. She'd tried to warn me years ago that I was making myself too small to fit into his ambitions, but I hadn't listened. I'd chosen my marriage over her doubts. Now I was ready to hear what she really thought. She picked up on the first ring. I could hear her TV in the background, some crime drama. She muted it immediately when she heard my voice, and I told her everything. The affair, the papers, the refinance, the plan to sell the house, Claire's betrayal, the grandsons being used as leverage. I talked for 20 minutes straight while Linda listened without interrupting. When I finally stopped, there was silence on the line. Then Linda said 3 words that changed everything. Get a lawyer. Not just any lawyer. Linda knew someone, a friend from college who'd become a family law attorney, specialized in high-asset divorces and financial manipulation. A woman, tough, smart, based in the city an hour north of me. Linda would call her tonight, set up an emergency meeting. I needed to bring every document I had, every bank statement, every email, every piece of proof that Robert was trying to cheat me out of what I'd helped build. And Linda said something else, something about the company. She reminded me that when Robert's firm went through its restructuring in 2012, I'd signed documents as his spouse, not just acknowledgement forms, actual corporate papers. Because back then, Robert had used our house as collateral for a business loan. The bank had required both signatures, which meant I might have a stake in the company I didn't even know about. Not a partnership, but a lien, a claim, something that couldn't be dissolved or restructured without my consent. I felt something shift, a tiny crack of light in the darkness. Maybe I wasn't as powerless as Robert thought. Maybe 40 years of being invisible had made him forget I existed on paper, in legal documents, in corporate filings. Maybe he'd gotten so comfortable assuming I'd cooperate that he'd made mistakes. The hearing was in 2 weeks. Linda's lawyer friend could get us in front of a judge fast, file for an emergency restraining order preventing Robert from selling or refinancing any marital assets until the court could review the case. But I needed to move faster than he did. I needed to freeze everything before Friday's closing. I stayed up all night organizing documents, bank statements from our joint account showing Robert's unusual transfers, credit card bills showing dinners and hotels I'd never been to, the printed emails from his computer, the refinance application from the mortgage company, the market analysis from the realtor. I made copies of everything, stored originals in a safe deposit box Linda helped me open at a different bank across town, left the copies in my purse, kept my purse with me at all times. Wednesday morning, Robert left early for meetings. I drove straight to Linda's lawyer friend. Her name was Patricia Warren. She was in her 50s, gray hair cut short, wearing a black suit that meant business. Her office was small but immaculate, law books lining the walls, a desk covered with case files. She offered me coffee and a chair and listened to my story with the same careful attention Linda had given me. Then she asked questions, hard questions, about the company structure, about the home purchase history, about whose name was on what deed and title and account. I answered everything I could, showed her the documents, watched her face stay neutral and professional even when she was reading Robert's emails, planning to cut me out. Patricia said we had a case, a strong case. Robert had made several critical errors. First, the house was in both our names, joint tenancy. He couldn't refinance without my genuine consent, and if I testified that my signature had been obtained under false pretenses or duress, the mortgage company would back out immediately. Second, the company had never removed me from the collateral agreements from 2012. I was still listed as a secondary guarantor on business debts that had never been paid off, which meant any major restructuring required my signature. Third, Robert's emails showed clear intent to defraud me of marital assets. That was a crime. Not just grounds for divorce, actual fraud. But Patricia warned me. This was going to get ugly. Robert would fight. Claire would probably testify for him. I might lose access to my grandsons during the court proceedings. I might lose friends who didn't want to pick sides. People would gossip. The church ladies would whisper. Neighbors would stare. Was I ready for that? I thought about Tyler's drawings on my refrigerator. Mason's smart questions. 40 years of partnership dissolved in emails to a woman half my age. Claire's text offering me every other Sunday like I was a supervised visitor. Robert's smile when I lied about signing papers. The refinance closing scheduled for Friday. The Italian restaurant he wanted to try with money he was stealing from our shared life. I told Patricia, yes, file everything. Today, I was ready. She made calls while I sat in her office drinking coffee that tasted like courage. Calls to the mortgage company, formally contesting the refinance application. Calls to the courthouse filing emergency motions. Calls to Robert's company demanding copies of the original operating agreement and collateral documents. By noon, everything was in motion. By 3 p.m., Robert had been served with papers at his office. By 5 p.m., my phone was exploding with messages. Robert first, angry, confused, demanding to know what I thought I was doing, telling me I was making a huge mistake. This could have been simple. Now it was going to cost both of us everything. Did I want that? Did I want to destroy 40 years over pride? Then David, Claire's husband, colder, more controlled, telling me this was disappointing. He'd thought I was reasonable. He'd thought I cared about family. The boys were asking questions. This was going to be traumatic for them. Did I want my grandsons to remember me as the grandmother who tore the family apart? Then Claire, crying, begging me to stop, saying Dad was devastated, saying Monica was just a friend. This was all a misunderstanding. Why was I being so dramatic? We could fix this if I just dropped the legal action. She'd talk to Dad. They'd work something out. Please, Mom. Please don't do this. I didn't answer any of them. Patricia had told me not to. Every text, every voicemail, every message was potential evidence. Let them talk. Let them show their strategies. Let them reveal who they really were when I didn't cooperate. That night, Robert didn't come home. I sat in our house alone and felt the silence like a presence. 40 years of noise and now nothing. No TV in the background, no phone calls, no sound of his car in the driveway. Just me and the walls I'd painted and the floors I'd mopped and the memories I'd made in every room. I walked through the house like a ghost. The living room where we'd hosted Christmas, the dining room where we'd celebrated anniversaries, the kitchen where I'd packed school lunches and made Sunday dinners and cleaned up after family gatherings, the bedroom where we'd slept side by side for decades. When did he stop loving me? When did I become someone he could erase? Thursday morning, I got a certified letter from Robert's attorney, the one with the bad cologne, a formal offer. I could have the house, keep it, live there as long as I wanted. In exchange, I'd sign away all claims to his retirement accounts, his company shares, and any future earnings. I'd get the house and $75,000 in cash. He'd get everything else. And I'd agree to stay silent. No contesting the divorce, no disparaging him publicly, a clean break. It sounded almost generous, until you did the math. The house needed a new roof, new furnace, updated electrical, at least $80,000 in repairs before I could sell it. And without Robert's income, I couldn't afford the property taxes, couldn't afford utilities, couldn't afford to maintain it. I'd be house poor and broke within 2 years. Then I'd be forced to sell anyway, but with no leverage left. Robert would get everything he wanted, and I'd end up exactly where he'd planned, in a small apartment with barely enough to survive, visiting my grandsons every other Sunday if I behaved. I called Patricia. She laughed, actually laughed, said this offer proved how scared Robert was. He was trying to buy me off cheap before discovery revealed how much he was really worth. She told me to refuse. We'd file our counteroffer tomorrow, full accounting of all assets, equal division of everything, and she'd subpoena Monica, force her to testify about the money trail, about how a junior assistant could suddenly afford to buy into an engineering firm, about where that money came from. Thursday night, Claire showed up at my house unannounced. I opened the door, and she pushed past me into the living room. Her eyes were red, her face blotchy. She'd been crying. She stood in the middle of my floor and started yelling, asking me what I thought I was doing, asking me if I realized I was destroying Dad's reputation. Monica had quit, Just walked out. The firm was in chaos. Dad might lose his partnership over this. Did I care? Did I care that I was ruining him? I let her yell. When she finally ran out of breath, I asked her one question. Did she know about Monica? Did she know her father was cheating on me when she told me to be mature about his happiness? Claire's face went pale. She stammered, said it wasn't like that. Dad and Monica were friends, colleagues. Nothing had actually happened yet. They were waiting until after the divorce was final. That made it okay. That made it respectful. Dad was doing this the right way. I asked her when she became someone who thought there was a right way to betray your wife of 40 years, when she became someone who'd use her own children to manipulate their grandmother, when she decided her father's new girlfriend was more important than her mother's dignity. Claire started crying again, said I didn't understand. David's job depended on staying on Dad's good side. They needed Dad's connections, his recommendations, his support. If she went against him, David could lose everything. Their house, their stability, the boys' private school. She was trying to protect her family. Why couldn't I see that? I saw it. I saw exactly what was happening. Claire had a choice. Stand with me and risk David's career, or stand with Robert and keep her comfortable life. She'd made her choice, and she needed me to make mine the easy choice for her. Sign the papers. Disappear quietly. Make it simple. I told her to leave. She stood there frozen, mouth open, like she couldn't believe I'd said it. I walked to the door and held it open, told her I loved her. I loved those boys more than my own life, but I was done being invisible, done being erased, done cooperating with my own destruction. If she wanted to side with her father, that was her choice, but she didn't get to ask me to make it easy. She left without another word. I watched her car pull away and wondered if she'd come back, if the boys would ask for me. If Mason would remember his Nana's face, if Tyler would forget the woman who made cookies with him. Friday morning arrived. The mortgage closing that was supposed to seal my fate, but the closing didn't happen. The mortgage company had received Patricia's formal contest. They'd frozen the application, pending legal review. Robert called me 23 times. I didn't answer. He showed up at the house at noon banging on the door. I didn't open it. He shouted through the wood, told me I was being selfish, told me I was going to regret this, told me he'd make sure I never saw the boys again. I recorded every word on my phone, sent it to Patricia. She said it was perfect, proof of harassment, proof of using grandchild access as leverage. We'd submit it with our custody request. Because yes, grandparents had rights. In our state, if one parent was weaponizing access, grandparents could petition the court for visitation rights. We were filing that motion Monday. The weekend was quiet. Too quiet. No texts from Claire. No calls from the boys. I went to church Sunday morning like always. Sat in my usual pew. Felt the stares from people who'd heard rumors. Saw the whispers behind hands. The pastor's wife gave me a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. The choir director avoided eye contact. I sat through the service with my head high and my hands folded and prayed for strength I didn't know I had. After church, a woman approached me in the parking lot. Her name was Janet. She'd been in my Bible study group for 10 years. She was older than me, maybe 75. Widow. She took my hand and squeezed it. Told me she'd been through something similar 30 years ago. Her husband had left her for a younger woman too. Back then, there were no lawyers for women like us. No legal protections. She'd lost everything and had to rebuild from nothing. But she'd survived. And she told me something I'll never forget. Don't let them take your story. Tell your truth. Stand in it. Own it. Because the only thing worse than losing everything is losing yourself. I cried in that parking lot. First time since this whole nightmare started. Janet held me while I sobbed. Then she let me go and told me to call her if I needed anything. Anything at all. One woman who'd been there. Who understood. Who didn't judge or gossip or pick sides based on who had more money. She just saw me. Really saw me. Monday came. The hearing. Patricia and I met at the courthouse at 8 a.m. Robert was there with his Cologne attorney. Monica wasn't there. She'd refused to testify. But Patricia had submitted the emails showing money transfers, showing her sudden financial ability to buy into the firm, showing that the money came from the refinance application that Robert had tried to push through using my forged cooperation. The judge was a woman in her 60s, sharp eyes, no nonsense. She reviewed the documents while we sat in silence. The Cologne attorney tried to argue that this was just a standard divorce proceeding, My lawyer was being overly aggressive. Robert was a respected businessman. This was all a misunderstanding about timing and paperwork. The judge looked up, asked Robert directly if he'd tried to refinance the marital home without my genuine informed consent. Robert hesitated, said he'd asked me to sign papers, said I'd agreed. The judge asked for proof. Robert's attorney produced the appointment card, the one Robert had given me that sent me to his attorney's office. I took the stand, testified about walking into that office, about the cologne, about the pressure, about being told to cooperate, about the loan application listing only Robert's work email, about the closing scheduled without my knowledge, about the emails planning to use my equity to fund Monica's partnership buy-in. The judge's face didn't change, but I saw something flicker in her eyes. She asked if I had proof. Patricia submitted the printed emails, page after page, 40 minutes of reading while we sat in that courtroom. I could feel Robert getting more tense beside his lawyer, could see the Cologne attorney flipping through papers trying to find counter-arguments. When the judge finished reading, she ruled from the bench, immediate freeze on all marital assets, no refinancing, no property sales, no transfer of company shares. Robert was ordered to maintain all joint accounts at current levels. The house remained in joint ownership with both parties having equal access and responsibility. And here was the part that made Robert's face go gray. The company's operating agreement was being subpoenaed, full accounting of all financial transactions for the past 3 years, because there was evidence that marital assets had been illegally diverted and the court needed to determine the full extent of the damage. The hearing was in 2 weeks, full discovery. Both parties required to submit complete financial disclosure. Assets, debts, income, expenses, everything. Robert tried to argue. His lawyer tried to call for recess. The judge shut it down, said this was exactly the kind of financial manipulation she'd seen too many times. Husbands trying to cheat wives out of decades of partnership. She wasn't having it, not in her courtroom. She set the next hearing date and dismissed us with a warning. Any attempt to hide assets or influence witnesses would result in sanctions, criminal sanctions. I walked out of that courthouse into February sunlight that felt like victory. Small, temporary, but real. Patricia was grinning, said we'd just won the first battle. Robert was on defense now. His lawyer would try to negotiate, try to settle, try to make this go away before full discovery revealed how much he'd been hiding. She was right. Tuesday morning, I got a new offer. Robert would give me half of everything. The house, the retirement accounts, his company shares, equal division, fair division. In exchange, I'd agree to a quiet divorce. No public accusations, no courtroom drama. A simple settlement that would let both of us move on. It was the offer I should have gotten from the start. The offer the law entitled me to anyway. But now it came with an extra condition. I had to agree to limited grandparent visitation, supervised visits, every other Sunday, 2 hours, at Claire's house, with David present, because the boys needed stability, because I'd created so much conflict, because this was what was best for the children. I looked at that offer and saw the trap. They'd give me money but take my family, give me assets but erase my identity as Nana. I'd be a stranger visiting on schedule, a disruption to be managed, a problem to be controlled. And what would I tell Tyler when he asked why Nana couldn't come to his birthday party? What would I tell Mason when he asked why I wasn't at his school play? I called Patricia. She said the choice was mine. The financial offer was fair, legally sound. I could take it and walk away secure. But the grandparent access clause was garbage. We could fight it. We could argue for unrestricted access. But it would mean more court dates, more fighting, more time, and no guarantee we'd win. Or I could try something different, something Robert wouldn't expect. I could negotiate directly with Claire, woman to woman, mother to daughter, cut out the lawyers and the husbands, and have one honest conversation about what mattered. I drove to Claire's house Wednesday afternoon, unannounced. David answered the door, told me it wasn't a good time. The boys were doing homework. Claire was busy. Maybe I should call first next time. I stood on that doorstep and looked at this man who'd helped orchestrate my erasure, this man who'd used his financial expertise to help Robert hide assets, this man who was now blocking my access to my own grandchildren. I told him I wanted 5 minutes with Claire, alone. He could stand outside the room, he could supervise, but I needed to talk to my daughter without him filtering every word. David's jaw tightened. He was going to refuse. But Claire appeared behind him, looking thin, tired. She told David it was fine. She'd talked to me. He didn't look happy, but he stepped aside. We sat at her kitchen table again. But this time, I didn't wait for her to speak first. I told her everything. Not about the money, not about the legal battles, about what mattered. I told her about the day she was born, how tiny she was, how perfect, how I'd held her in the hospital and promised I'd always protect her, always fight for her, always be there. I told her about teaching her to ride a bike, about staying up late helping with algebra homework I barely understood, about driving her to college and crying the whole way home because my baby was growing up, about holding Tyler for the first time and seeing her face in his, about Mason's first words, about every Sunday dinner and holiday, and ordinary Tuesday that made us a family, and I told her I was failing at my promise, failing to protect her, because I'd taught her by example that women should be small, should cooperate, should sacrifice their own needs for everyone else's comfort. I'd taught her that being a good mother meant erasing yourself, that being a good wife meant staying invisible, and now she was doing the same thing, letting David control her choices, letting Robert manipulate her loyalties, using her own children as bargaining chips because that's what she thought family meant. Claire was crying. Not angry tears. Heartbroken tears. She said she didn't know what to do. David was scared. His whole career was tied to Dad's network. If she went against Dad, David could lose his job. They could lose the house, the boys' school, everything they'd built. She was trying to protect her children. Wasn't that what mothers did? I asked her what she was protecting them from. Me? Their Nana who loved them? Or the truth that their grandfather was a man who'd cheat and lie and use them as weapons? What kind of protection was it to teach boys that women were disposable, that grandmothers could be erased, that family loyalty only went one direction? She didn't have an answer. We sat in silence. I could hear the boys in the next room. Tyler singing to himself, Mason reading out loud, normal sounds, innocent sounds. I thought about leaving, going home, letting Claire make her choice without more pressure. But then Mason walked into the kitchen. He stopped when he saw me. His face lit up. "Nana!" He ran over and hugged me, asked where I'd been. Why hadn't I visited? Why didn't I come to his basketball game last Saturday? He'd scored 6 points. He'd looked for me in the stands. Where was I? I looked at Claire. She looked at the floor. I told Mason I'd been busy, but I was sorry I missed his game. So sorry. He pulled back and looked at me with those smart 9-year-old eyes. Asked if I was fighting with Grandpa. Asked if that's why Mom wouldn't let him call me anymore. Asked if I still loved them. I pulled him close. Told him I loved him more than all the stars in the sky. Told him nothing would ever change that. Nothing. He asked if I could come to his next game. Saturday, at 3 p.m., at the community center. Could I please come? I looked at Claire. She was crying again. But this time she nodded, whispered okay. I could come. I could see the boys. We'd figure it out. We had to figure it out. Because Mason was standing there with hope in his eyes, and Tyler was calling from the other room, asking if Nana was here, and this was real. I left Claire's house that day with something I hadn't had in weeks. Hope. Not certainty. Not victory. Just the smallest possibility that my daughter was still in there somewhere, underneath the fear and the pressure and the choices she'd made to survive. Saturday came. 3 p.m. I drove to the community center with my heart hammering. What if Claire changed her mind? What if David blocked me at the door? What if the boys had been told not to talk to me? I parked in the lot and sat there for 5 minutes trying to breathe normally. My hands were shaking again. I'd worn my good coat, the navy one I saved for important occasions, fixed my hair, put on lipstick. I wanted to look like someone worth knowing, someone worth remembering if this was the last time. The gym was loud with squeaking sneakers and bouncing basketballs and parents cheering from folding chairs. I scanned the bleachers looking for Claire, found her sitting near the top with Tyler beside her. David wasn't there. That was deliberate. Claire had made a choice. Small, temporary, but real. I climbed the bleachers. Claire saw me coming. Her face was uncertain, nervous, but she didn't leave. She shifted over and made space. Tyler launched himself at me with his sticky hands and his huge smile. "Nana, you came. Mason's playing. He's number 7. Watch." I sat between Claire and Tyler and watched my grandson play basketball. He wasn't the best player on the court. He missed more shots than he made. But he tried, he ran, he played defense, and every time he glanced at the stands, he was looking for me, making sure I was still there, still watching, still proud. At halftime, Claire spoke without looking at me. Said David was working, a Saturday meeting, convenient timing. She'd told him she was bringing the boys to the game alone. He'd argued, said I wasn't supposed to have unsupervised access. She'd told him to read the court order. There was no restriction yet, nothing official, just his fear and Robert's manipulation. And she was tired, so tired of being afraid. I asked what changed, what made her stand up to David. Claire finally looked at me, said it was Mason's face when he asked if I still loved them. The fact that he had to ask, that he'd been taught to doubt his Nana's love, because the adults in his life were using him as a pawn. She said she'd been awake all night, thinking about what kind of mother she wanted to be, what kind of example she was setting. And she realized she was teaching her sons the same lesson I'd taught her, that women disappear, that women don't fight, that women cooperate even when cooperation means betrayal. She didn't want that anymore. She didn't know how to fix everything, didn't know how to protect David's career or manage Robert's anger or solve the legal mess. But she knew she couldn't keep Mason and Tyler away from me, couldn't use them as leverage, couldn't participate in erasing someone who'd loved them since before they were born. The second half started. Mason scored. Tyler cheered so loud people stared. I clapped until my palms stung. After the game, we went for ice cream. All four of us, Claire, the boys, me. We sat in a booth at the old diner on Main Street and ate sundaes and talked about normal things. School, friends, the science project Mason was building, Tyler's loose tooth. No one mentioned Robert or David or lawyers or courts. We were just family, messy, complicated, but real. When I dropped them back at Claire's house, she hugged me, whispered that she couldn't promise what would happen next. David was furious about today. There would be consequences. But she needed me to know she was trying to find a way to protect her kids and her marriage and her mother all at the same time. It might not be possible, but she was trying. I drove home with ice cream in my stomach and something lighter in my chest. Not victory, not resolution, just connection. The boys knew I loved them. Claire knew I was fighting for something that mattered. That had to be enough for now. The next hearing was in 9 days. Patricia called Monday morning with discovery results. Robert's financial disclosure had been submitted, and it was incomplete, deliberately incomplete. He'd listed the retirement accounts, the house, his salary. But the company accounting was vague. No specific profit-sharing numbers, no detailed asset valuation, no explanation of how Monica could suddenly afford a $100,000 partnership buy-in on an assistant's salary. Patricia had the subpoena power now. She'd requested 3 years of company financial records, bank statements, profit distributions, loan documents, everything. And Robert's company partners were cooperating. Not because they liked me, because they were scared. If Robert had been using company assets inappropriately, they could be liable. Their reputations were at stake, their licenses, their whole professional lives. They were throwing Robert under the bus to save themselves. The records arrived Thursday. Boxes of documents. Patricia's paralegal spent 2 days going through them. What they found was damning. Robert had been moving money for 18 months. Not 6 months. 18. Small transfers at first. Bonuses paid to Monica that were 3 times what other assistants made. Consulting fees to a shell company that Monica had created. Profit distributions that went to Robert's personal account and then immediately transferred to accounts in Monica's name. Over 18 months, Robert had diverted nearly $200,000 of company money. Not his personal earnings. Company money. Money that should have been split with his partners. Money that belonged to the firm. He'd been embezzling, slowly, carefully, funding Monica's lifestyle and her partnership buy-in with stolen money. And there was more. The shell company Monica created? It had purchased consulting services from another company, a company owned by David, Claire's husband. David had been paid $70,000 over the past year for financial consulting services. Services the company records showed had never actually been performed. Fake invoices, phantom work, money laundering that put David right in the middle of Robert's scheme. Patricia was gleeful, said this changed everything. This wasn't just divorce. This was criminal fraud, corporate embezzlement, conspiracy. Robert's partners were filing a lawsuit against him. They wanted their money back plus damages. They were removing him from the partnership, forcing him out. His career was over. And David? David was being questioned by the firm's attorneys. If he'd knowingly participated in fraud, he could lose his financial license, could face charges, could lose everything he'd been so desperate to protect. I should have felt victorious, should have felt vindicated. Instead, I felt sick, because this meant Claire's worst fears were coming true. David's career was imploding, not because of me, because of his own choices, his own greed. But she'd blame me anyway. She'd think I'd destroyed her family. Patricia asked what I wanted to do. We could use this in the divorce, prove Robert's character, prove he'd been lying and stealing, guarantee I got everything I deserved. Or we could be strategic, offer Robert a deal. I'd stay quiet about the criminal evidence if he agreed to a clean division and unrestricted grandparent access, protect Claire's family by not prosecuting David, in exchange for my silence and my dignity. It felt like extortion, like becoming what I hated, but it also felt like power. For the first time in 40 years, I held the cards. Robert needed my cooperation now, not the other way around. What was I going to do with that? I thought about Janet in the church parking lot, about not letting them take my story, about standing in my truth. But I also thought about Mason asking if I still loved him, Tyler's drawings on my refrigerator, Claire trying to find a way to be a better mother than I'd taught her to be. The hearing was in 4 days. I had to decide who I wanted to be, the woman who destroyed everyone to get justice, or the woman who used her power to rebuild something better. I called Claire. She answered on the 5th ring, sounded exhausted. I asked if she knew about David's consulting payments. There was a long silence. Then she said yes. She'd found out 6 months ago, confronted David. He'd told her it was legitimate, just helping Dad with some financial planning for the firm. She'd wanted to believe him, needed to believe him. So she'd stopped asking questions. I told her the truth about the fake invoices, about the embezzlement, about the lawsuit Robert's partners were filing, about the fact that David could lose his license. Everything was about to come out. In 4 days, in open court, unless I stopped it. Claire started crying, asked what I meant. How could I stop it? I told her I had a choice. I could present the evidence and destroy Robert completely, destroy David in the process. Or I could negotiate, use the evidence as leverage, get what I deserved without burning down Claire's entire life. But I needed something from her first. I needed her to tell me the truth. Did she know from the beginning? Did she know Robert was planning to erase me and she'd helped because David was getting paid? Or had she really believed this was about my well-being, about simplifying my life? More silence. Then Claire said something that broke my heart. She said she'd known. Not everything, not the details, but she'd known Dad was planning to leave, known there was someone else, known David was helping with the finances, and she'd gone along with it because David promised they'd be taken care of, promised her father would help them buy a bigger house, pay for the boys' college, set them up for life. All she had to do was cooperate, help convince me to sign the papers, make it easy. She said it felt justified at the time. I'd been so passive for so long, so willing to fade into the background. It seemed like I'd want to avoid conflict, want to make things simple. She'd told herself she was helping me, protecting me from an ugly divorce, but really she was protecting herself, her comfort, her security, and she was so ashamed she could barely breathe. I asked if she was telling me this because she was sorry or because she was scared. She said both. She was terrified of losing everything, but she was also genuinely sorry. Sorry for using the boys. Sorry for betraying me. Sorry for becoming someone who'd trade her mother's dignity for a bigger house and college funds. She didn't know how to fix it, didn't know how to make it right, but she was sorry. I told her what I needed. Full custody cooperation. No more restricting my access to Mason and Tyler. No more supervised visits. No more using them as leverage. I wanted to be Nana again. Fully, freely, without conditions. If she gave me that, I'd protect David. I'd negotiate with Robert in a way that kept the criminal evidence private. I'd let him save face with his partners if he gave me a fair settlement. I'd give Claire a chance to rebuild her marriage and her family without complete destruction. But if she fought me, if she sided with David and Robert one more time, I'd release everything, every document, every email, every piece of evidence. I'd watch them all go down, and I'd walk away with my dignity and my money and no regrets. Claire agreed. Said she'd talk to David tonight, make him understand. They'd cooperate. They'd support me, whatever I needed. Just please don't destroy them. I hung up and sat in my kitchen staring at the refrigerator where Tyler's drawings hung with magnets, crayon flowers and stick figure nanas. This was the moment, the choice that would define everything that came next. Mercy or justice, family or revenge. Who did I want to be when this was over? Friday morning, I met with Patricia, told her what I wanted. A settlement offer that gave me exactly half of everything. House, retirement accounts, Robert's company shares valued before the embezzlement, plus a formal agreement guaranteeing unrestricted grandparent access. No supervised visits, no conditions. My right to see Mason and Tyler whenever Claire and I agreed. Protected legally, permanent. In exchange, I wouldn't testify about the criminal evidence. I'd let Robert's partners handle their lawsuit privately. I'd stay silent about David's involvement. The divorce would be quiet, dignified, fair, and final. Patricia said Robert would never agree. He'd fight. His ego wouldn't let him admit defeat. But she'd present the offer, along with a very clear explanation of what would happen if he refused. Criminal charges, public scandal, complete destruction. His choice. The offer was delivered Friday afternoon. Robert's response came Saturday morning. Not from his lawyer, from Robert himself. He called my cell phone. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. His voice was different, smaller, older. He said he'd read the offer, asked if I was serious, if I'd really stay quiet about the company money. I said yes, if he agreed to my terms, all of them. He asked why. Why would I protect him after everything he'd done? I told him the truth. I wasn't protecting him. I was protecting my daughter, my grandsons, the family that still mattered. He'd made his choices. Now he'd live with the consequences. But I didn't need to destroy Claire's life to get justice for mine. I just needed what I'd earned, what I'd built, what I deserved, and I needed him to stop using my family as weapons. Robert was quiet for a long time. Then he said, okay. He'd agree. He'd sign the settlement, give me half of everything, sign the grandparent access agreement. He'd cooperate with the divorce, make it clean. But he had one question. Did I hate him? I thought about 40 years. The good part. The partnership that used to be real, the daughter we'd raised together, the grandsons who had his eyes and my mother's smile, the life we'd built before he decided it wasn't enough, before he decided I wasn't enough. I told him I didn't hate him. I didn't feel anything anymore. He was a stranger who'd once been my husband. That was all. No love, no hate, just distance. And maybe someday I'd forgive him. But right now, I just needed him to sign the papers and let me start over. He said he understood, said he'd have his lawyer draw up the settlement by Monday. We'd finalize everything before the hearing. Avoid the courtroom drama, keep it private. He asked one more thing, if he could still see the boys sometimes. Not often, not competing with me, just occasionally, because they were his grandsons too. I said that was up to Claire, not me, not him. She was their mother. She got to decide who had access and when. If she wanted him around the boys, that was her choice. I wouldn't interfere, but I also wouldn't help him. He'd burned that bridge. Now he could figure out how to rebuild it himself. We hung up. I sat there holding my phone and feeling empty. No triumph, no victory. Just tired. So tired. This was what winning felt like. Not celebration, just exhaustion and the quiet knowledge that I'd survived. The settlement was signed Tuesday. Both lawyers, both parties. A judge reviewed it in chambers and approved it that afternoon. The house went on the market immediately. We'd split the sale proceeds 50-50. I'd get half the retirement accounts transferred within 30 days. Robert's company shares were being valued by a third-party appraiser. I'd get half that value in cash within 60 days, plus the $75,000 Robert had originally offered, plus legal fees. Total, I'd walk away with approximately $650,000. Not rich, but secure. Enough to buy a small condo. Enough to live on if I was careful. Enough to start over at 62 years old. The grandparent access agreement was filed with the court and signed by all parties. I had unrestricted visitation rights, legally protected, enforceable. Claire couldn't take the boys away. David couldn't supervise. Robert couldn't interfere. I was Nana again. Officially, permanently. The divorce was finalized 6 weeks later. A simple hearing, 5 minutes in front of a judge. 40 years dissolved with a signature and a gavel. I walked out of that courthouse alone. No family, no friends, just Patricia beside me with her briefcase and her satisfaction that we'd won. But the real resolution came 2 weeks after that. Mason's 10th birthday party. Claire called and invited me. Said it would be at their house, Saturday afternoon. Pizza and cake, family only. Robert wasn't invited. David would be there, but he'd been instructed to be civil. She wanted me there. Needed me there. The boys had been asking about me constantly. When was Nana coming back? Why couldn't Nana live closer? Could Nana come to the party? I showed up with a present wrapped in blue paper. A science kit Mason had mentioned wanting. Tyler opened the door and screamed, "Nana!" He grabbed my hand and pulled me inside. Mason was in the living room with friends from school. His face lit up when he saw me. He ran over and hugged me, whispered thank you for coming, said he'd missed me so much. David was in the kitchen. We made eye contact. He nodded. I nodded back. No warmth, no forgiveness, just acknowledgement. We were family now. Complicated, damaged, but stuck together for the sake of 2 little boys who didn't deserve to lose their grandmother. Claire pulled me aside while the boys ate pizza. Said things with David were hard. They were in counseling, trying to rebuild trust. He'd quit his job before he was fired. Was looking for something new, something clean. They'd probably have to sell the house, downsize. The boys would change schools. It was going to be a rough year, but she was grateful. Grateful I'd given them a chance. Grateful I hadn't destroyed them when I could have. Grateful the boys still had their Nana. She said she was trying to be different, trying to raise Mason and Tyler to respect women, to value honesty, to understand that family meant standing together even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. I told her I was proud of her. Proud she'd found the courage to stand up to David. Proud she was choosing a harder, better path. Proud she was teaching her sons something true. We hugged, not the quick, polite hug of strangers. The real thing. Mother and daughter. Broken and healing. But together. The party wound down. Kids left with goodie bags. Tyler fell asleep on the couch with frosting on his face. Mason opened presents and thanked everyone with the careful politeness of a kid trying to be grown up. When he opened my science kit, his eyes went huge. "This is perfect, Nana. This is exactly what I wanted. How did you know?" I told him Nanas always know. It's magic. He laughed and hugged me and told me he loved me. I held him close and breathed in the smell of boy and birthday cake and second chances. This was the victory. Not money, not revenge. This moment, this boy, this family we were piecing back together from broken parts. I left as the sun was setting. Claire walked me to my car, asked where I was living now. I told her I'd found a small condo across town, 2 bedrooms, one for me, one for whenever the boys wanted to visit. It had a little balcony with room for flower pots, good light, quiet neighbors. It was enough. She asked if I was happy. I thought about it. Happy wasn't the right word. I was at peace. I was free. I was myself again for the first time in 40 years. Not Robert's wife. Not the invisible woman managing his household, just me, learning who that was, building a life that fit. The house sold 3 months later. I got my half of the proceeds, $320,000. Added to the retirement account and the company share valuation, I had just over $600,000 total. I paid off the condo, put the rest in conservative investments that would generate enough income to cover my expenses. I wasn't rich, but I was secure. I could breathe. I could choose. I started volunteering at the library on Tuesdays, joined a book club, took a watercolor class at the community center. Small things, normal things, building a life that was mine. I saw the boys twice a week, Sunday dinners at my place, Wednesdays after school. We'd make cookies, do homework, watch movies, be family without the weight of betrayal hanging over us. Robert moved downtown with Monica. I heard through Claire that the relationship didn't last. Monica left him 6 months after the divorce was final. Turns out she'd wanted the partnership and the money, not the 65-year-old man attached to them. When Robert lost both, she found someone else, someone younger, someone with more to offer. Robert was living alone now in his modern condo, with its gym and its security and its emptiness. I didn't feel sorry for him, didn't gloat either. He'd made choices. Now he was living with them. That was justice enough. David found a new job, lower salary, smaller firm, but honest work. He and Claire were still together, still in counseling, still trying. I didn't know if they'd make it. That wasn't my business anymore. My business was showing up for my grandsons, teaching them by example what it meant to stand up, stand firm, stand proud. One Sunday evening, 6 months after the divorce, Mason asked me a question while we were washing dishes. He said, "Nana, why did Grandpa leave? Why did he want to hurt you?" I'd been dreading this question, practicing answers in my head. But when it came, I just told him the truth. Simple, age-appropriate, honest. I said sometimes people forget what matters. They think they want something new and exciting. They think change will make them happy. And sometimes they hurt people they love while chasing something that doesn't even exist. Grandpa made mistakes, big mistakes, and those mistakes had consequences. But that doesn't mean he's a bad person, just a person who chose wrong. Mason thought about that, asked if I forgave Grandpa. I told him I was working on it. Forgiveness was hard. It took time, but I was trying, because holding on to anger just made me heavy, made me small, and I didn't want to be small anymore. He hugged me, said he was glad I didn't stay small, said he liked Nana better now, happier, stronger, more fun. I laughed and told him I liked me better too. Tyler, who'd been half listening while drying plates, asked if he could sleep over next weekend. Just him. A special Nana and Tyler adventure. I said absolutely. We'd make pancakes for breakfast, watch cartoons, build a blanket fort. He cheered and did a little dance that made Mason roll his eyes and smile. This was my life now. Pancakes and blanket forts and dishwashing conversations, Sunday dinners in my small condo, flowers on my balcony, watercolor classes, library volunteering, the boys' school plays and basketball games, Claire's slow journey toward becoming someone stronger, my own slow journey toward forgiveness, not for Robert's sake, for mine. I kept one thing from the old house, a photo from our wedding day, Robert and me at 24 and 26, young, hopeful, believing we'd be together forever. I kept it in a drawer, not on display, not hidden, just there, a reminder that love was real once, that 40 years meant something even if they ended, that the woman in that photo was brave enough to start over, and the woman I was now was brave enough to do it again. Some nights I'd sit on my balcony and watch the sunset, think about Janet from church who'd told me to own my story, think about Claire finding her courage, think about Mason and Tyler learning what family really meant, think about the life I'd built from broken pieces. I wasn't invisible anymore, wasn't erased, wasn't cooperating with my own destruction. I was a grandmother who showed up, a mother who demanded respect, a woman who'd fought for her dignity and won. Not perfectly, not without cost, but won. The story could have ended differently. I could have signed those first papers, accepted the crumbs Robert offered, disappeared into assisted living and supervised Sunday visits. Let them erase me quietly. That's what they expected, what they planned for, what would have been easier for everyone except me. But I made a phone call instead, got a lawyer, stood my ground, used the power I'd forgotten I had, and I didn't destroy anyone in the process, didn't become the villain, didn't choose revenge over dignity. I just chose myself, finally. After 62 years of choosing everyone else, that was the real victory. Not the money, not the house sale, not even the boys, though they mattered most. The victory was looking in the mirror and recognizing the woman looking back, strong, scarred, standing, still here. If this story has touched your heart, subscribe now, leave a like, and tell me in the comments what city you're watching from. That helps us keep sharing stories of strong women, families, and the unexpected turns of life. Remember, this is a dramatized fictional story for entertainment only. It does not provide legal, medical, or financial advice. Viewer discretion is advised.